I'm just waiting for YouTube to tell me that it's finished setting up. There we go. Hello and welcome to another terrific tips for business conversation. I, of course, am Terry Watkins, your host, because you can't spell terrific without Terry. Hello. You already knew that, though. That's why you're here and you're listening. We've had amazing guests on our show for the last 2 years now. I can't even believe it. And it has been absolutely incredible journey to talk to some of the most amazing entrepreneurs and business owners worldwide. And so I'm blessed and grateful to have these people come and share their wisdom, their insights, and their terrific tips with all of us so that we can avoid the same pitfalls and things that tripped them up, because we have these little nuggets and tips and habits to put into our back pocket. And then any mistakes we make are new because they're not the same ones that somebody else already shared with us. And I'm so grateful for that. Today, I, of course, have a new guest with me, and I'm so excited to meet her. Her assistant reached out to me, which is super cool. This is Dr. Kizzy Parks. And for those of you that don't know Dr. Kizzy Parks, I'm going to introduce her to you. She, just a little fun background about her, as a kid, used to clean golf balls located in an alley behind her friend's house. And then she would resell them through a fence to golfers. How creative is that? I've never heard of this being done before, but she used to use the money to buy FUNYUNS and Nutty Bars, which is super fantastic. She always knew she wanted to become an entrepreneur and earn an advanced degree in psychology. Her entrepreneurial spirit meshed up well with her inquisitive nature. As an adopted child, she always wanted to and then meet her birth family. She was driven to be successful in business as a business owner, and she always knew that she would be. So she went on actually to earn her Ph.D. and to establish KPC over a decade ago. And we'll talk a little bit about KPC in a little bit. Today, she owns and operates multiple businesses and has over $50 million in government contracts that have been awarded to her. And that's one of the things we're really going to dive into today is how did she do that? And what are some of the things we as independent business owners need to know in order to tap into some of that revenue stream that's available to us? And then through her latest company, GovCon Winners, she has helped service-based small business owners learn how to win profitable federal government contracts. So this is really her area of specialty and expertise. And so I'm super excited to have her with us. She's based in Miami Beach, Florida, and she has quite the following on social media. So we'll make sure to get her social media contact information throughout our conversation. Kizzy, like I said, has been awarded over $50 million in federal contracts. And because of her clients and the KPC team, she's been ranked number 965 on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing private company list, ranked number 18 in top education companies in Inc. 5000 fastest growing private companies list. And she's a Florida company to watch by Grow Florida. She's got so many other awards and recognitions, but I want to take this time to just welcome Kizzy to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Terry, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, the pleasure is all mine and the listening audience. I assure you, there's quite a lot that you have done, that you've been able to accomplish. And so I'm just in awe. Like, we didn't even read through all of the awards. I'm just in awe on everything that you've been able to do. What do you attribute to like being the biggest thing that has helped you be this successful?
Oh, wow. I think it's two things, if I may. One was my adopted father always supported me, always supported my kooky ideas, my entrepreneurial endeavors and interests. And he always pushed me to do and be better. And then the second was, I think it's just, as I learned more about my birth family, just learning that I come from a line of people who have been entrepreneurial and very determined. And so I think it's just a combination of the environment I grew up in and just having this kind of innate entrepreneurial spirit. And so I just don't give up.
I love it. And shout out to dads who are supportive and encouraging, adopted dads or birth dads. It doesn't matter. Those influences in any entrepreneur's life really does make a huge difference, because they become the person on our shoulder, right? They tell us, yes, go, you're our cheerleader, or, oh, you can't do that. So are you the naysayer in your child's life, or are you the one that's going to cheerlead them along the way? So yay for dads who cheerlead. We love that.
Yes. It's super important. Super, super important.
Absolutely. So that was a curveball question. I don't think I've ever asked anybody that before. So that was fun.
That was great. I love the question.
Yeah. What was one of the biggest challenges that you've had to face? Because there must have been some serious challenges, especially when we start talking about government contracts.
The biggest challenge was just like understanding what all of it meant. It was literally like learning a new language. Because I still distinctly remember I met someone who's also in government contracting. I think he recently sold his business for $10 million. And he said, oh, you print this in section L and section M and N, and you go. And I was like, what in the heck is this man talking about? Like, I don't even understand what any of that means. And so I took a lot of time really trying to figure out what is the government buying? Where do you go to even see these things? And, oh, I just respond and I'm going to win. I mean, that's what I thought. And then trying to understand, like, what are they really saying? I mean, that's the biggest obstacle, is just really understanding not only the government mindset, but just what these these RFPs, these different requests for proposals, what they actually are saying, because it's very different in some ways than state, local, private, etc.
Yes. And I think we talked a little bit about that prior to getting on our show today. It is kind of like learning a foreign language, because they really, a request for proposal or an RFP really isn't like you're going, for those of you who are business owners or small business owners who are in sales potentially, it's not like you're going to the government's door and knocking on their door and saying, hey, I have X, Y, and Z service. Can I present a proposal to you and then you agree to it, right? That's not really how it works when it comes to government contracts. They have a whole system and a whole process. Is there a particular website or series of websites that you went to start really kind of diving into what do these requests for proposals look like? How do we even get our hands on them, that kind of started you along your journey?
Well, initially, no. I just was like, I wish I could say yes. Like, I wish I could be like, yes, I had a business plan and went to this website. No, like, I did none of these things. Like, it's taken a long time to get to where I'm now. I just was so focused on, okay, I have this work and I just need to make these people happy. Like, I had no idea in the sense of about profit and client relations and different things of that nature, of like what really all these different layers and levels that go into owning and operating business. So I fortunately was in the position where, through my subcontract at Patrick Space Force, I was just in front of a lot of military and federal government people. They would hear me speak, or I would meet them at, an event or a meeting. And at that time, because I provided a lot of diversity and inclusion data and analytics, research, training, etc., the audience that I typically connected with, the prospects, many of them were like, oh, wow, we really want to use you. We would love to have your services. So I don't think I ever went on, it was FedBiz. I'm trying to think of what it used to be called. I think it was fedbiz.gov. It's in the the War Dogs movie. It's now sam.gov, but it used to be something else. And so I didn't even go on there. I literally was so focused on that one client. And then naturally people would say, I remember distinctly, Army Reserve, hey, we would love to pay you to speak at our Army Reserve conference in New Orleans, and we'll pay for everything. We want you to speak. And I was like, and thankfully at the time I had a friend who was a sergeant major in the Army. And I was like, can you help me? I'm like, how do I present to these Army guys? And I'm like, in my 20s. And I'm like, I don't really like, what do I do? Like, I mean, not that I ever had an age thing. It was just like, I didn't know what to do. So the point is, I was very fortunate where people saw that what I provided solved some kind of thing for them. And it wasn't until way later that I started to go on the website and really start to partner with companies.
But what's really interesting there, and I love that you've kind of taken us on this journey. What's really interesting there, because we've talked a couple of times here on the show, is it was about who you knew, like who you associated and affiliated with. You put yourself in the center of the government world. You started engaging with and being around different governmental organizations. And then you started asking people what your next best step is. Like, if I was going to, okay, you want me to come speak? Awesome. Where do I go to even put something like that together? What do you want me to speak on? So they must have gotten a feeling from you of your confidence and of the value and of the things that you could share with their platoon, that they were like, oh, we need you to come and talk. Right. So that's really cool. Like, you surrounded yourself with people. You weren't even necessarily trying to sell them anything. You were just being you, which I love too. And that's something that goes to that authenticity, that genuineness that we talk so much about in marketing in today's world. You just showed up. You were just Kizzy.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. And you were just building these relationships. And when the opportunity presented itself, you started to ask the right questions, because it's not about knowing how to do something. Being resourceful is about figuring out who you need to know to help you get there. Amazing. So is there a particular person or group of people in your journey that really were like pivotal in helping you kind of figure out and navigate through some of the government contracts so that you could go do these speaking engagements?
There were a few. The major person who helped me with the Department of Defense speaking engagements was Greg Jenkins, who I'm still in contact with, and we're still friends today. He helped me a lot because up until then, I, worked little odds and end jobs. I was things of that nature. I interned at Lockheed Martin for a whopping 3 months, and I was working my Ph.D. Like, I taught online, I taught in person, but I never worked for the federal government. I never worked for a government contractor. I never worked for a Fortune 500. I'd never really been paid for a DOD speaking engagement before. And there were many, many, many following that. And so he really helped me with how to present myself to the audience, how to set up my slides, how to work the room. He really helped me with a lot of that. And then Sergeant Johnson, Bill Johnson, he helped me a lot with understanding how you really make money off of government contracts and who to align with and who to be careful of. And then Kevin Jackson out of Orlando helped a lot with getting me prepared for what's called a capability brief. And I'll never forget, his advice was, when you meet with agencies in person, you want to touch all of their senses. So he's like, bring something. He's like, I don't care if all the pages are blank. He's like, just bring something and you can say, hey, we created this, and, have like a DVD. And some of you may think, oh, DVD, we don't use those. Well, the Department of Defense do. You can't use thumb drives. So they still use DVDs. So again, it's physical, right? You see it, you can touch it. Oh, wow, you guys created this. Oh, this is your training manual. Oh, this is, and then he's like, you may even want to have some people call in so then they can they know it's more than just you on your team. And so it was just very valuable information, because I've learned the importance of that show and tell, which some of you listening may think, oh yeah, we already do that. I mean, for me, this was all completely new. I had no idea of what went into these different kind of meetings or the expectations that were there. So they all were super helpful. And even those that like conned me or I had situations with, which is, there's a lot of that in this journey. I mean, they were helpful too. I also just really learned that you can never assume. And even though it's government contracting, people do bad things. And it was very eye-opening, some of the things that people have done or they try to do or they did. And I just look at it like, well, it's a learning. And I think that's just an important lesson. It's like loss prevention. There was a time when I worked at a call center for a very long time. And when I was in between my master's and Ph.D. program, and the call center had a loss prevention department, because lots of people would call in with fraudulent credit cards and purchase all kinds of things. No different than today, right? No different. But they built in the loss prevention. It was built in. It was built into the budget. It was built into the call center. We all knew this was happening. And so I look at it as the same as being an entrepreneur, is you have that loss prevention. You just have to be prepared. At some point in time, it's going to happen.
That's interesting. Thank you so much for the tips on how you would present to the room, like what you show up with, what's in your hand, and in targeting all of the senses, because I really feel like that's something that's kind of been missing, especially amid COVID, right? Like not being able to go and meet in person. Right. There isn't this touchy-feely component. So finding creative ways to get touchy-feely. And guys, this isn't just for government contracts. Like if you're trying to win the bid for one of your businesses, when was the last time you stopped by? When was the last time you brought them some donuts or pizza? Something that doesn't cost a ton of money, but you showing up, it triggers the senses. And that saying, the secret to a man's heart is through his belly.
Yes.
It's the same for business. The secret to winning the business is through their belly. What are you feeding them? What are you feeding them in their brain? What are you feeding them in their belly? So that's a great reminder tip. Thank you for that.
Oh, anytime. And it's still, even if you're virtual, there's other ways you can do it. Maybe there's something interactive you can send them, or, you can still maybe possibly mail them something, who knows, but it just shows that you care, they're top of mind, and you're not just in their life because you're trying to get money from them. So it seems transactional. So you're taking this kind of transactional route that many take, and you're making it more relational.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm all about. I'm all about the relationship and creating the long-lasting relationships. I've just done it kind of like you. One of my friends actually did a post today asking how you got into the business that you're in. And I was like, I tripped and fell. And then I looked behind me and said, oh, I've been doing this. Because I've been doing relationship marketing and consumer behavior analysis since the very first job. And I didn't even realize it. At the time, it was called customer service.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I am so grateful of these people who came alongside you and started showing you some tricks, some tools, some techniques. When it comes to KPC, what does KPC stand for? What is it?
So KPC stands for K Parks Consulting, and it's the flagship government contracting company. So KPC, I started directly out of graduate school, and we provide a ton of training and development services, IT services, professional services, like we inspect vape shops across America. We have other professionals on our team, like a Catholic parish team member, exercise physiologist. At the end of the day, KPC provides services to the federal government. So they may have people, government employees or military team members who provide similar services, but they need more. And so the quickest, fastest, least expensive way is to bring on board government contractors. And so that's KPC. And it's interesting just to keep in mind in that the federal government spends over $500 billion a year on everything from products to services. So it's just a very wide open space.
Wow, $500 million a year. Holy smokes, that's a lot. But if you think about it, our government has hundreds of thousands of soldiers that they need to provide for. We have bases in just about every state across the country that they have to stock and keep inventory in for our soldiers who are there. So yeah, I mean, we've got to feed these guys and gals, got to keep clothes on their back. They're paying for it. They get a discount usually. I know that because my brother's in the Air Force. So I know that they have to pay for the services, but usually it's duty free. So they're not getting hit with the same taxes that you and I would get hit with. But the only way they can do that is through these government contracts, these affiliate relationships. So government was kind of the first one on the scene to ever think about affiliate relationships and affiliate marketing.
In many ways. I mean, and definitely in many ways, because you're able to provide so many different products to the federal government. And sometimes there's not that question of like, well, why are you selling pancake mix? It's like, okay, if you're selling pancake mix, it's what they're looking for, it's at a price, it meets their requirement, then they're going to buy it from you. It's very similar to how Amazon set up. If you want to resell cereal that you get at a discount at a big grocery store and you want to resell it on Amazon, no one's going to question you. No one's going to say, well, Terry, why are you selling cereal? You have an Amazon store and people were just buying. We're not thinking like, why did they start this store to sell socks? Like, no, we're just like, we need some socks. We need some cereal. And that's kind of how the federal government is. And that's what I find so fascinating about it, because you can provide so many things if you desire. And the big companies do that. The IBMs, the Lockheed Martins, they provide so many different products and services to the government.
And that's really interesting too, to think about, because in the small business sector, we think about focusing in on our why. We talk about why being so important in the small business sector. And it is when you're doing B2C or when you're doing B2B, but when you're doing B2G, which is often the sector we don't talk about, the why doesn't really matter. The question is, can you provide what they're looking for in the price range that they have to allot for that product or service? If the answer is yes, and you are able to follow rules, you're probably going to be able to win that contract. We're going to get into rule following here in a minute, but Kizzy, this has already been so filled with great information. What's the best way for our audience to get in touch with you, to follow you, or to engage with some of the materials that you have out there to help them secure some of their government contracts?
The best way is to go on to LinkedIn, Kizzy Parks. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, Kizzy M. Parks. I have a website that is more of a sales page. So I'm just warning you, I'm not trying to get you to go buy something right now, but there's GovCon, 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 www.govconwinners.com is a page to check out, but please connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and more is to come. Please keep that in mind. More is to come, more information, more on my little YouTube channel. I'll share more, but just please reach out to me.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And all of our listeners, please go ahead and do that. She's a wealth of knowledge. I'm already connected in I think a couple of the platforms, but I got a couple more to go and connect with on. And for those of you that are listening or watching to this, if this conversation is really supporting you, helping you move the needle forward in your business, go ahead and hit the like or subscribe button so that you never miss another one of these amazing conversations with our professionals in our community and in our world that are really making a difference. I really appreciate the support and the engagement. So thank you. All right. So let's talk a little bit about following the rules. So when it comes to the government contracts, the requests for proposals, they're really specific about some of the things that they want. Not only is it in a foreign language, so you almost need a cipher to figure out what the hell they're asking for. But once you've got it figured out, what happens next?
What happens next is you have to decide if you're going to respond and if you're willing to follow the instruction. So, for instance, they may say Times New Roman, font size 12, single space, no more than 10 pages for volume 1, excluding table of contents and cover. Then they'll say sometimes, you must include resumes. Each resume can be no longer than 2 pages. Sometimes they'll say you must include a glossary. You may include samples. So you have to just decide, are you going to play the game by the rules? It's kind of like Uno or some kind of card game. We all have our ways of playing, or whatever card game you grew up playing. And you have your rules and you play with someone else and you're like, that's not the rules. That's not how we play. And it's like, you have to decide, well, which rules are you going to follow? Are you going to just give in and say, hey, I just want to have fun and play? And the same thing with government contracting is, are you going to say, okay, got it. I need to use this font. I have to use this page margins. I may have to put this on a DVD and mail it. Or are you going to say, no, I don't want to do that? And the decision is yours. And so then the next part of that is, and this is huge. This is a big one that nobody talks about this. No one talks about what I'm going to share with you. That is the evaluation criteria. In majority of solicitations for the federal government, they'll list the evaluation criteria. And many kind of gloss over it. So for instance, I just came across something recently and it said, lowest cost, we will rank the technically acceptable proposals from lowest to highest. They're literally going to do that. Literally. So some of you may think, and I'll come across this, well, oh, we want a bid. We can do this. I've been providing janitorial services for 20 years. People will say to me, we can do this. And I respond back with, well, do you even know what the lowest cost is? Like, what are they paying? What is their, do you even have an idea? It's like Price is Right. Do you even have an idea of where you're throwing a number out, or are you just throwing out a number and hope that you win? And so you have to pay close attention to that, because you're going to be very disappointed. Very disappointed if you
there's a lot of research involved.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
there is.
So if there is a criteria, I love that they give you the criteria. It's like a business owner saying, yeah, I'm talking to 5 other agencies and these are the things that I'm grading them on. If you can win on that grade scale, you're going to win the bid. How nice would that be? As a sales rep, you're like, awesome, thanks. I know exactly what I need to do and how I need to show up. That's what the government's giving you. But you do have to look into what does lowest cost to the government mean? And they might not just be talking about labor. They might be talking about supplies, right? And so adding all of that stuff together and then questioning, is this something that I can do? Now, just because it's lowest cost doesn't mean you're going to win the bid. Like, I've heard stories where people have come up with software services that the government asked for. It was in a request for proposal. They pitched the software service. They came in lowest bid. They didn't win the bid. And then 2 years later, the same contract came up again. They pitched the same pitch. They increased their rate literally 100%. They won that bid. So sometimes it's not about the price point that you put on there. It's about, does it align with the value that they're about to receive too? And so making sure that research goes into play. Thanks for that tip. And I'm sorry, I started talking before you were done. So
no, you're perfect. You're perfect. And just adding onto it is often that's insinuated in the proposal. Because one of the biggest myths around government contracting, I hear this all the time, I don't have the certificates. I don't have the certifications. They just go with the lowest price. They don't always go with the lowest price. It's really about the evaluation criteria. So if price is not one of the criteria, then it shows they're emphasizing value, And then you get to make a decision. What kind of client do you want? Do you want a client who only cares about cost? If that's the way that you're set up, then terrific. If you're interested in clients who seem to really value what you offer, then perhaps bid on those type of opportunities.
That is such a good tip. And that's a good tip for everybody. I love that this is like a conversation about winning government contracts, but it can be applied universally to business in general, right? We talk all the time in business about knowing your value, right? And knowing who your audience is, who you want to work with. And this is the same conversation just applied in government contracts. So you know what your value is, you know what you are capable of and what you can do really well. And then you see this request for proposal on one of these resources. And I'm sure on the KPC site or on the GovCon site, there are links to some of these websites where you can go and find requests for proposals and start to read through some of these. And when you do, you might find one that you're like, ooh, that one's really good. Okay, so you're going to slow down. You're going to make sure you read all of the details so that you can follow the instructions. And then you're going to really question, am I the right organization for the job? Can I actually bring the value that the government is looking for? And can I do it at the price point that makes sense for what the government needs?
Right.
So those are all great questions to ask. Absolutely. Is there a time frame that usually happens? Like, do they give time frames in their request for proposal, or is it kind of like they put the request out there and then it's just kind of Wild West open market until they get that position filled?
So they'll put time frames on there, but just like with any other client, no different if you sell online, someone may cancel, someone may change their mind. So there's usually a time frame. Some may take more time than others, but usually you have some kind of an idea typically. And then there is also they call it kind of like the procurement process, the procurement schedule. So there's this, I want you to imagine, if you stretch your arms out, that there's literally this timeline of the government is interested in something to when the government actually buys it. And it's usually like the length of your arm span here, and so you have that, but I don't get so caught up in it because it's, again, no different than when we're buying something. We're buying something to solve a pain, entertainment, joy, because somebody has voluntold us we need to buy it. Right. And so just keeping that in mind, it's like, hey, if someone said, oh my gosh, we need 50 books tomorrow, well, chances are they're going to put that out and figure out how to buy 50 books in 2 days, in comparison to, well, we need these admin and we know we need these admin, but we have a whole year. Okay, well, that's like, Christmas. We all know when it's coming, and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, but then we all forget, and then we all rush the same day, and then we figure it all out. And sometimes the government does that. Then they rush and wait until the fourth quarter to purchase a bunch of things. So, so that's why again, don't get so caught up in all of the technical. It's about, just taking it all in and reviewing it and getting to see what's out there.
Excellent. I appreciate that. And that's a great thing to keep in mind. Everybody's got their own time frame.
Yeah.
And if we think about this too, when it applies to business, some business owners' fiscal year is June to July.
Yeah.
Right. Other business owners' fiscal year is like November to October. Every business has a different fiscal year. Mm-hmm. A lot of businesses operate on the standard calendar year. I imagine the government probably operates on the standard calendar year, but I don't know.
Well, I'll add to that, because this is something else that is very important to know. This is super important. The federal government, the brand new fiscal year starts 1 October. 1 October until the end of September. So right now, during the first quarter, whenever you have the first quarter, is pivotal time to kind of get out there. But then you have to keep in mind, 1 October Halloween, Thanksgiving, and different holidays. And then people are coming off of rush, 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 spend, potential government shutdowns. But you're still taking this time to kind of get to know people. And then you go on through the cycle. The second quarter, people are kind of refreshed, back to work, new year, right? Third quarter, spring, summerish. Some people aren't really around because they're on summer vacation. And then the fourth quarter, they know they have to be around because you have to spend all this money or you're going to lose it. No different than in private sector. It's just the beginning of October is the start of the fiscal year. And then we go until the end of September. So does that mean that is how every agency buys? No, not at all. And that's what, again, I think is so fascinating is you can kind of see the rhythms. Like I noticed, for instance, we bid on religious positions. I had no idea the federal government spent so much money on Protestant, Catholic, rabbi, sometimes Wiccan, depending, different positions for chapels and other different needs, Army, Air Force, some Department of Justice. And the thing is, I noticed that often those will pop up sometimes first, second quarter, not always fourth. And so it's just something to keep in mind because I love bidding on those type of positions. They're, in my opinion, fun. It feels really good to just do that. And so it's, again, something interesting because it's almost like crypto. You can't predict it. It's just like this is not one of those businesses, this area where you're like, well, every year, this is what the Air Force does. Well, maybe for some things, I don't know, but I just know that throughout the 10 plus years of doing this, like something interesting always happens. And I'm not talking about handling COVID and things of that nature. I'm just talking in general. That the other thing I want everyone listening and watching to take away is don't believe the myth of, oh, it's the federal government. You must do everything by what they say. That is not the case. We're talking about human beings. There's still people. So what do we do as people? We have preference. We make exceptions, right? Some of us are more strict than others. So never forget that you're dealing with people and oftentimes taxpayer dollars. That's the big thing to keep in mind. Not every client is using taxpayer dollars, but often is taxpayer dollars. So they don't want you out there trying to hustle something and you're on a yacht flexing on Instagram. I mean, but
so be careful what lifestyle photos and images and videos you put out there on Instagram, because that could damage your ability to get that government contract because they are looking into you.
Huge.
Yeah, that makes sense. Such a great tip. And it's important to know that too. Like in the private sector, we have this cycle too, right? Things happen. You have an employee who's like your right-hand person, and all of a sudden they got a job offer they couldn't refuse, and they've given you a month notice or 2-week notice, whatever it is. Well, you've got a period of time now that you need to find a replacement employee and get them trained up. Government faces that too. People are retiring. People get injured.
Yeah.
Things happen. Contracts end. And contracts are ending every day, just like contracts are starting every day. So I love that you really touched on that. Like, pay attention to your specific, like what you're serving in the government, and pay attention to that sector of the government and see what their pattern of behavior is in that sector. Dimes to donuts, it's going to illuminate when's the best time to engage. And I also like that you mentioned the fiscal year, and you talked about when they start to like wake up and shake the fog off, because even in the private sector, we have this, right? Like the last quarter of the year, everybody's like, oh my God, I had all of these things that I wanted to do and I haven't done any of them. And they're running out there spending money. The first quarter comes around, they're totally tapped. They've spent all of their money. Mm-hmm. Now they're just waiting to see what's going to happen. Maybe they make their plan for what they want to have happen that year. And they say, I've got the year. We've got time.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't do anything. And this happens a lot. They don't do anything for the first quarter. Some of them will dust off the fog by March and start moving the needle into the things that they want to do in the second quarter. Others are going to wait through the second quarter because they want to see if everything that they just did is going to have an effect. And so they're looking at the report to see, did it have the effect that I want it to have? And if it didn't have the effect they wanted it to have, now they're looking for who's the replacement. So they're looking for the replacement in the second or third quarter. But again, they're not going to pull the trigger again until the third or fourth quarter, because that's just how it works in a lot of industry. Not every industry, but a lot of industry in the private sector too. So paying attention to those patterns of behavior, it's not always going to be like, it's not a rule that you can live by, but it is something that you can kind of build your business plan around, or build your strategic marketing planning around, so that you can stay top of mind in the in-between. That's really the key.
It's super key, so that they think of you come third, fourth quarter, or if a pop-up, we need this now, happens, and they think, oh, okay, I remember Terry, let's reach out and see what we can do. That's what you want to happen.
Now, when it comes to the government contracts, and I don't know a lot about the government contracts, to be totally transparent. So my questions are like, I know nothing.
No, they're great questions. These are perfect questions.
Awesome. So when it comes to that, is it kind of like you're on like Indeed or Monster and they have this job listing, this request for proposal, but you don't really know like a point of contact? So then how do you stay top of mind for somebody that's like anonymous?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great analogy. It's very similar. So there's a website, SAM, like Uncle Sam, sam.gov, and you can go on and you can search without logging in. I must warn you, it's a good search. There's some little tricks and tips that I'm totally open to sharing. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn. And so for instance, you can go on there and let's say you search training. I'm just one of our big areas. So you search training and something will come up like, it might be executive leadership training, and it'll have a little synopsis, and it'll have usually contact information, name, email, phone number, potentially an attachment. Now, they may say we will take no phone calls. Sometimes it doesn't say that. But you don't know budget. You don't know, just looking at this, is there an incumbent? Is this new work? So there's all these things that when you're new to the government space, you don't even know what questions to ask. You can ask questions, who to ask, and most importantly, where to go outside of sam.gov to even get some of the answers. So there's all these, of course, other resources that have a fee, and some of them are free. There's other ways to work around it where you can learn those answers. But just like with the Indeed example, just because the recruiter's contact information is there does not mean the recruiter is going to reach out to you or contact you through LinkedIn. You could hear nothing from them, because you have to keep in mind how many businesses are reaching out to them. And that's not the only opportunity they're connected to, and they have another job. So they're inundated. So that's why really understanding the whole mindset of the government, what's in this document, what's in between the lines, and leveraging all this other intelligence out there is so helpful. So you maximize your time and bid on opportunities that are going to lead to profits, opposed to, oh my gosh, I signed up, I did all these things, I got all these certifications, I bid on so many opportunities and I never won, because you didn't understand these things I just shared. But also, how would you know? You don't know unless you have someone there to guide you, right? And that's why I spent so much time learning and going all over the state of Florida and all over the United States to really figure out what goes into really having a profitable federal government contracting company.
That's amazing. So in your trainings at KPC, do you teach private business owners how to decipher and understand and like what tools and resources to use? in order to understand these requests? You do?
We do that through, I do that through GovCon Winners. I have an inaugural class starting in January of 2022. I've had beta clients, I've had a private coaching client, and I'm going to launch in a couple of months the official program. And I go over everything that's needed to make sure you're registered, for you to successfully at least bid on one opportunity during the course. And most importantly, understand what makes opportunities profitable. That's really, really key, because there's a lot of people out there that talk about, I worked for a government contractor and I won contracts, or there was a time I had a construction business and I got government contracts, or I worked for the government in contracting and now I'm teaching XYZ. But they fail to really talk about profitability and what kind of opportunities to go after, because you have to remember what we previously discussed. There are opportunities where they're lowest cost. So if they're lowest cost and many people are bidding, it's like the limbo. Somebody's going to go so low that you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize the human body could do that. And that's how it is with government contracting. How did they go so low? How are they able to charge the government $17.25? I have people asking me to pay them $20. How, and then maybe they say, hey, it's okay. We'll sacrifice a profit, or we'll take a loss because we want to win. So it's very intriguing. And so through govconwinners.com, connect with me on LinkedIn, definitely go over all of this so that you're aware of how it all works, because there's a lot there. There's a lot to it.
Yes, it sounds like it. And I can't believe that we've been able to talk about all of the things that are involved, and we're only just like the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, definitely.
We've barely even begun to scratch the surface in this conversation. That course sounds absolutely amazing. So make sure you connect with Kizzy over there on GovCon. Get yourself set up for the program, especially if you're interested in doing and getting government contracts, even if you only want 1 or 2 government contracts a year. What could 1 or 2 government contracts a year do for your business, do for your life, your community? That can make all the difference. It would totally pay for itself. So definitely go and check that out. And Kizzy, can you give us your LinkedIn again so that they can go reach out?
Of course. Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Kizzy Parks. It'll say like Kizzy light bulb, M as in Marie Parks. You can't miss it. I think I had my blonde hair then. I love changing up my hair color. And then on Instagram, it's Kizzy M Parks. I'm on Twitter too. Kizzy I think Kizzy KPC on Twitter. But definitely DM me on LinkedIn and Instagram, because on Twitter is too much spam on the DMs. But reach out to me. Let me know that you watch, that you're listening. I'm always here to be of help. And it's a really cool, I'll just say it's a really cool journey in government contracting, but it's one that you totally can navigate.
So amazing. Thank you. I do have one more question before I let you go. But before we get into that, if you want to know more about how Spin Frogs, my company, works, feel free to reach out to spinfrogs.com. We have a free 15-minute conversation. What we do is we focus a lot on training and education too. We also operate as fractional chief marketing officers or adjunct marketing directors for those businesses who are in transition. Maybe you're in transition because you're in a growth phase, or you're in transition because one of your key facilitators is looking to retire. And so you're wanting to set the business up in the most positive light to sell it. We've done that a couple of times, and it's been a lot of fun to do that. So get in touch with us, ask us about it, because marketing is a multifaceted piece of your organization. It is a full-time job. And if you're not trained in keeping up with all of the things that are changing in the world of marketing and relationship development, you're missing out. And so we want to make sure that we have the things in place that make the most sense for your organization. And we're not just trying to be Gary Vee and jump on every single platform that comes out, because that might not be an effective use of your time. Just like we're talking about here, We need it to be an effective use of your time and an effective use of your budget. So let's find what makes the most sense for you together so that we can maximize your impact and the legacy you want to leave in the world. Get in touch with spinfrogs.com today for a free conversation. I really appreciate it. All right, Kizzy. So this has been amazing. You've given us some great things to think about, excellent knowledge and nuggets that we can apply to government contracts and in the private sector as well. If there was one piece of advice, though, that you would give your younger self, what would it be and why?
Don't get discouraged, because there are many, 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 many times things seem super hopeless. So hopeless. I thought, how am I going to get out of student loan debt? How am I going to get out of this business debt? Oh my gosh, this one contract was canceled, or, oh my goodness, what's going on in my personal life? Or there's a lot of just like, oh, the sky is falling. And it's going to be okay. You have to give yourself permission to go through what you're going through and just realize that it's really helping you to be your better self and succeed. Because I'll close with this. Many people think the most successful startups, entrepreneurs, business owners are those who are under the age of 25. Most people think that, you missed it. You got to be 25 or 17 and a half or something. And research has shown it's really kind of your mid to early 40s. They are the most successful when it comes to kind of startups, businesses, a whole entrepreneurial space. So keep that in mind. It's a journey. Doesn't mean that if you're under 45 or over 45 that you're out of luck. It's a journey because you're learning throughout the way. And just keep that in mind. So give yourself permission. It's going to be okay.
That's such a great piece of advice and definitely excellent perspective. I love to look at artists too and say, Van Gogh wasn't famous until after he died, but he kept painting anyway. Mm-hmm. Michelangelo wasn't famous until after he died, but he kept making sculptures anyway. So keep doing it. Like, you might be feeling like you're kind of pushing up against a brick wall. Sometimes you might feel really discouraged, really frustrated. Maybe imposter syndrome is sinking in for you. And if that's the case, I encourage you to come check out Association on October the 27th, because we have Brenda Kalasa, a business coach out of Canada, Alberta, Canada, talking about imposter syndrome and how you can conquer imposter syndrome and keep moving forward, because we need to keep moving forward. We need you. Anything that you do, we need it here. There's a reason that you were gifted the vision and the ability to do what you do. So keep doing it. Such a great tip. Thank you so much, Kizzy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I appreciate everyone who's watching and listening, and have an amazing, amazing day.
That's right. And everybody who's